Hello and welcome to Learn with Hema's class. My dear students, yes, today I have come up with the most awaited lessons workbook solutions from Evergreen. That is ICSE Class 10 Treasure Chest book with the photograph of the very first short story, and the solutions are definitely from Evergreen Workbook from the revised edition. Multiple choice questions, I will be doing it in a separate video wherein because there are many multiple choice questions in the revised editions, so I'll be doing it in a separate video. So today we are going to go through all the passages, all the 8 passages in the revised edition we have. There are 8 passages, 5 questions each passage, and the entire thing we are going to cover up in this video. So before going ahead, one small request, my dear students. If you are not a subscriber to my channel, that is if you haven't subscribed my channel Learn with Hema, please do subscribe my channel, do support me to reach 100k subscribers. So this is the passage 1. The photographer looked at me without enthusiasm. He was a drooping man in a grey suit with the dim eyes of a natural scientist, but there is no need to describe him. Everybody knows what a photographer is like. Now the question is, what do you think the photographer did not look at the narrator with enthusiasm? Answer: the photographer must have found the appearance of the narrator too dull. The narrator's fate might not be at all appealing, attractive to the photographer. Therefore, the photographer did not look at the narrator with enthusiasm. Next question. Explain the narrator's attitude towards the photographer. The narrator finds the photographer as a drooping man with the dim eyes of a natural scientist. The narrator does not find any features of the photographer interesting. This shows his attitude of dislike and displeasure towards the photographer. He does not even like to describe the photographer. Third question. What was the narrator's experience with the photographer? The narrator's experience with the photographer was bitter, quite depressing and uninspiring. What tells you about the appearance of the photographer? The narrator makes use of the following words to describe the photographer as drooping in a grey suit and dim eyes of a natural scientist. Fifth question. How did the narrator spend his time while waiting for the photographer? The narrator spent his time reading Ladies' Companion for 1912, The Girls' Magazine for 1902 and The Infants for 1888 while waiting for the photographer. Now my dear students, one thing I would like to add on over here is, that is, if you are preparing yourself for the board exams, I would suggest that wherever you find the keywords, you underline the keywords in your answers. Now the answers which I am giving you, your teachers might be giving you different answers, but they would mean the same. Whatever I am giving you, they are perfect to the chapter. Just underline the keywords. For example, in this answer we have the Ladies' Companion for 1912, the Girls' Magazine for 1902 and the Infants for 1888. These are the three points. Okay, you get over here. So you can just underline the keywords. This is the second passage. He was only in it a second, just time enough for one look at me, and then he was out again, tearing at the cotton sheet and the window panes with a hooked stick, apparently frantic for the light and air. Okay, so here, who is he here in this extract? Was he at peace with himself? So he here in this extract is the photographer. No, he was not at peace with himself because he looked frantic for light and air. Second question. What do you think of the studio where the photographer was to take the narrator's photograph? The studio where the photographer was to take a photograph of the narrator was a dimly lit and a very suffocating place without any proper ventilation. What was the photographer trying to do in his studio? The photographer was trying to take a photograph of the narrator. For this, he adjusted his camera by rolling it in the middle of the room. What was the photographer's reaction when he came out of the black cloth draped on the camera? The photographer looked quite grave and shook his head in dissatisfaction by looking at the narrator's face. He also expresses his anguish by saying to the narrator that his face is quite wrong. What was thought to be the problem with the face of the narrator? It was the narrator's face that was thought to be the problem. The face of the narrator was quite wrong and not at all photogenic. So you can underline the word photogenic. The photographer wanted to make several improvements in it to make it attractive in the photograph. Third passage. "I'm sure it would," I said enthusiastically, for I was glad to find that the man had such a human side to him. "So would yours. In fact," I continued, "how many faces one sees that are apparently hard, narrow, limited, but the minute you get them 3/4 full, they get wide, large, almost boundless in." So, first question, what was the narrator sure of? Answer, the narrator was sure of his face not being photogenic. So, you can underline his face not being photogenic. You can underline this as the keyword. He agreed with the photographer that his face would look better 3/4 full. So, agreed with the photographer would look better 3/4 full. You can underline over here. Second question, the man had such a human side to him. What does the narrator wish to convey about the man? The narrator here wants to convey that the photographer understands human limitations and helps in making good pictures even of those who do not have photogenic faces. How are the faces of the human beings made to look better? Photographers use their technical skills, you can underline technical skills, to make human faces look better in photographs. Then photographers also make the person give various poses, you can underline give various poses to make them look attractive. What is the tone of the narrator when he says that human faces are made to look better? The narrator's tone is sarcastic and ironical. You can underline sarcastic and ironical. Did the photographer himself need some improvement in his face or mind? How do you know this? Yes, the photographer himself needed some improvement in his mind as he does not behave well with the narrator. He needs to learn how to behave politely with a customer. His face also seems to need improvement as pointed out by the narrator. So here you can underline he does not behave well with the narrator and he needs to learn how to behave politely with the customer, and his face needs improvement as pointed out by the narrator. So these are the 3 points which you can include in this answer. This is the fourth passage. The ears are bad, he said. Droop them a little more. Thank you. Now the eyes, roll them in under the lids. Put the hands on the knees, please, and turn the face just a little upward. Yes, that's better. This was the passage. Question 1. Which features are asked to be improved upon? What is the tone of the speaker here? The facial features such as ears, eyes and the face itself, as well as the body features such as hands and knees, were asked to be improved upon. The tone of the speaker here is authoritative and commanding. Second question. Do you think the narrator is happy and satisfied with the photographer? No. So you underline no. The narrator is not happy with the photographer. He expresses his irritation and dislike. So you can underline irritation and dislike against the photographer time and again. He even leaves his photograph with him. So you can underline leaves his photograph with him. Which things other than the ones mentioned later in the context are to be set right? The narrator suggests that apart from his mouth, face, eyes, eyebrows, etc., the photographer should put his own attitude right. So, which are the ones mentioned in the context are to be set right? So, here the answer is the photographer should put his own attitude right. You can underline this part and not distort originality of the photograph. Even this, and not distort the originality of the photograph. Even this you can underline. Did all these features of the narrator meet the due approval of the photograph? How do you know? This is the fourth question. Answer no. So you can underline no. The features of the narrator did not meet the photographer's approval. He rather had a keen desire to improve upon them in the photograph using his own skills and different chemicals. So how do you know this? Because we come to know that he had a keen desire to improve upon them. Okay. Using his own skills and different chemicals. This also you can underline. Next question. What does the conversation in this extract tell you about the photographer's art? The conversation in this extract indicates that the art of a photographer is not very simple and easy. A photographer wants to use his art to make the objects look more beautiful than they are in reality. For this purpose, a photographer does not hesitate in distorting the reality. Fifth passage. Stop, I said with emotion, but I think with dignity. This face is my face. It is not yours. It is mine. I've lived with it for 40 years and I know its faults. I know it's out of drawing. I know it wasn't made for me, but it's my face, the only one I have. Question 1. Who is the speaker here? Who is he talking to? What is the occasion? Okay, the speaker here is the narrator. He is talking to a photographer. He talks to the photographer on the occasion of his visit to get his photograph clicked. So 3 questions and 3 answers. So here we have narrator is the first answer, you can underline. Talking to a photographer, second one you can underline. And third one, his visit to get his photograph clicked. You can underline these things. Second question, what prompted the speaker to say, it is not yours, it is mine? The photographer pointed out several drawbacks in the narrator's face. He told the narrator that his face needed improvement. It prompted the narrator to say that it was his own face and not of the photographer, that he was suggesting alterations in it. So here in this line, the photographer pointed out several drawbacks. This you can underline, and that his face need improvement. This line also you can underline. Third, what is the tone of the speaker? The tone of the speaker is full of anger and irritation. So anger and irritation, you can underline that thing. What does the extract tell about the narrator's present mood? The extract tells that the narrator is annoyed and is in a disturbed and angry mood. So it is annoyed, you can write that, and disturbed and angry mood, you can underline that. Which idea does the narrator try to convey through the extract? The narrator here tries to convey the idea that one must accept and appreciate one's original self. So you can underline, one must accept and appreciate one's original self. You can underline this part. It is better to be natural than being artificial and distorted. You can also, better to be natural than being artificial and distorted. You can underline this part also. Next passage, passage number 6. The photographer beckoned me in. I thought he seemed quieter and graver than before. I think too, there was a certain pride in his manner. He unfolded the proof of a large photograph and we both looked at it in silence. Is it me? I asked. First question. Where was the narrator asked to come and by whom? Answer. The narrator was asked to come inside the studio. So come inside the studio of the photographer. You can underline this. He was invited there by the photographer. So by the photographer you can underline here. Second question. What was the photographer proud of? The photographer was proud of the proof of a large photograph of the narrator. He was to further work on it to develop the photograph. Third question. Both the photographer and the narrator looked at the proof of the photograph in silence. Why do you think both were silent? Both of them were silent while looking at the proof of the photograph. The narrator was silent because he was surprised to see the negative that hardly resembled his face. The photographer was quite proud of his achievement in making the negative of the narrator's photograph, and this pride turned him silent. What was the narrator's reaction on seeing his photograph? The narrator's reaction on looking at his photograph was full of disbelief and surprise. So you can underline full of disbelief and surprise. Fifth question. What other changes did the photographer want to make in the final finish of the photograph? So answer. The photographer wanted to make changes in the eyebrows and the hair. According to him, the mouth and hair on the skull and his face all were to be adjusted and changed in the final finish of the photograph. So you can underline over here eyebrows, hair, and then mouth, hair on the skull and his face. You can underline these things. Okay, now next passage, passage 7. Yes, said the photographer thoughtfully. That's so, but I can fix that all right in the print. We have a process now, the sulfide, for removing the ears entirely. I'll see if. What had not been tampered with so as far as the body features were concerned? As far as the body features were concerned, the ears had not been tampered with by the photographer. Next question. To which question of the narrator does the photographer say yes? Does he agree to improve upon the picture? Okay. The writer says that the ears in the photograph were similar to that of his own in reality. He wanted to know if the photographer would make any changes to them. Also, the photographer says yes when asked about this. Yes, he agreed to improve upon the picture by changing the ears. Third question. Which features had the photographer retouched to make them look better? The photographer had retouched the eyes to make them look better in the picture. How do the photographers bring about changes in a photographer so that it looks completely different from the original? Answer. The photographers use the process called delphide and sulfide to make changes. So you can underline delphide and sulfide. to make changes in a photograph so that it looks completely different from the original. Fifth question, how did the narrator express his anger at the photographer later? The narrator later expressed his anger by not accepting the photograph. He left it with the photographer. So by not accepting it and left it with the photographer, you can underline these two. Now passage 8, last passage. Coat it with an inch of gloss, shade it, emboss it, gild it till even you acknowledge that it is finished. Then when you have done all that, keep it for yourself and your friends that may value it. To me it is but a worthless bauble. Now the first question for the 8th passage. What is the narrator's reaction on his photograph in his next visit? The narrator's reaction on his second visit is that of anger and frustration. So you can underline anger and frustration. He asks the photographer to keep the photograph with him. Mention at least 3 different processes with the help of which the photographers change the features in a photograph. The photographers change features in a photograph by using the processes like animation, delphide and sulfide. Does the narrator approve of the techniques of the photographers in bringing about changes in the original photograph? How do you know? The narrator does not approve. So you can underline does not approve of the techniques. So just underline does not approve of the photographers in bringing changes in the original photograph. He expresses his dislike. So you can underline this. He expresses his dislike for this in clear terms and leaves the photograph with the photographer as it was not the original one. 4th question. Would you support the narrator's viewpoint or the photographer's? Why? We would support the narrator's viewpoint. Of course, we would support the narrator's viewpoint, but this is an open-ended question. You can write the photographer's viewpoint also, but then you need to give a proper reason for that because why is asked. The reason should match with your answer. Always remember, whatever reason you give or whatever sentence you choose in open-ended questions, and then when you have to give reason, the reason should match with the answer, with your answer. So we would support the narrator's viewpoint. So here I am supporting the narrator's viewpoint. You can support the photographer's viewpoint also. But then you have to give a valid reason. Because one should always accept reality instead of artificiality and falsehood. So this is the reason which I have given while supporting narrator's viewpoint. 5th question. Why does the narrator call the photographer worthless bauble? Worthless bauble is a useless thing. The narrator calls the photograph a worthless bauble as it did not capture his real and original features. So what you can underline, as it did not capture his real and original features, it was artificial and distorted. You can also underline this. So here I believe our chapter is over. Question answers, complete workbook solutions from Evergreen Workbook, and that too a revised edition. So if you are working with an old edition book, last year's workbook, then some questions might be changed. But though they mean the same, questions might be changed. So that's all for today. Thank you so much. We'll soon meet in the next video. Bye bye. Till then, stay safe, stay secure.